So guys, let me ask you a question. So what do you think, what is the ECS? According to you, what does ECS stands for? So when we say that it is an elastic container service, right? So what is okay, let me ask you another question. Maybe many of you are already familiar with this. So what is EC2? So it is elastic compute cloud. Okay. So either you can say elastic compute cloud or elastic cloud compute, both are fine. Okay. Some people call it as elastic compute cloud, or some people call it as elastic cloud compute. Anything is fine. Okay. Now, as you know that EC2 is used, basically EC2, uh, you know, is used as a virtual machine. And can anyone tell me what can we do with this virtual machine? What is the purpose of using any virtual machine? According to best of your knowledge, what do you think that why do we need a virtual machine? That for any virtual machine in the world, there are two purposes. One is hosting an application, okay, hosting an application. And the second is to have the database. So either you will be using your virtual machine and you will be calling this virtual machine as database server, okay, or you will be calling this virtual machine as application server. So I mean, it depends whether you're hosting your application, then it becomes application server. And if you are running your database on top of virtual machine, then it becomes database server. Does that make sense? One thing, guys, always remember, okay, always remember this, because you guys are preparing for your interview and I know this very well. I tell you one thing, there is a small or slight difference between running an application and hosting an application. Okay. Running an application means you have your smartphone and you are running an application on it. Okay. So you're using your smartphone for an application. Let's say you're having a smartphone and you have WhatsApp on it. So that's running an application. That's running an application. But when we say virtual machine, it is hosting an application. So there's a difference between hosting an application and running an application. Hosting an application means that you are going to host an application, and this application is going to be used by a lot of different users. Okay. So a lot of different users will try to communicate with this virtual machine to use this application. That's hosting an application. But running an application is for your own use. In your laptop, you have Zoom. So that is an application which you're using for yourself. That is running an application. But let's imagine that Zoom is hosted somewhere on our server. So that is hosting an application. So when you say hosting an application, other users, they use it. But when you run an application, it is for your own purpose. So always remember, there's a slight difference between running an application or hosting an application. So you host your application on virtual machine, and then you call it as application server. And if you keep the database on it, then it becomes database server. Does that make sense, everyone? I need the
Yes.
or no, everyone.
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. So far, is it clear, guys? So far, everything is crystal clear. Now, over here, there's a problem, which was really confusing when in my initial days, it was really confusing that when we have application server with us, or we have virtual machine, and we can use this virtual machine for application or for database and this VM is also known as EC2 in AWS. So if in case I want to create a virtual machine in AWS, I will be using EC2. Now, I understand that EC2 can be used for application server and as well as database server, because EC2 is a virtual machine. Okay. If virtual machine can be used for database server and application server, it means EC2 can also be used for database server and application server. So does it make sense, guys, that can we use EC2 for hosting an application or keeping the database? Can we do it? Now the question arises that when we can do everything with EC2, then why do we need Elastic Container Service? When we keep, but I mean, it's not important because we have EC2, we are using it for database and we are using for application. Then why do we need it for ECS? I mean, why ECS came into picture? So EC2 you use for application server and database server, and ECS as you said, that you use for containers, to keep the containers, to run the containers, and you don't need to worry about scalability, and you don't need to worry about a lot of installation dependencies. I agree with you, but EC2 is, but behind the scenes, ECS is using EC2. So what is the purpose of using ECS? If ECS is in the background is using EC2, then what is the purpose of it? So basically what happens is that first we have to understand ECS, and then I'll come to the difference between ECS and EC2. Basically, AWS, all these big organizations, they have a habit of copying technology. They just want to copy the technology. Okay. Always remember, whether it's Microsoft, Amazon, Google, everyone, they have a habit of copying others. So when Google launched, Kubernetes, okay, Kubernetes got very popular in the market. Now it was a time for Amazon Web Services to launch some service for container, and they launched ECS. Now the benefits and the usage is quite similar in terms of ECS and Kubernetes, because these are the competitors. Though AWS has Kubernetes service also, which is EKS, Elastic Kubernetes Service, that is EKS. In AWS, you will find EKS, which is Elastic Kubernetes Service, which uses Google's Kubernetes. But AWS has its own container service, that is Elastic Container Service, and that is actually a big, you can say, competitor with EKS. What happens in ECS? In ECS, basically, when you create a cluster, you create a cluster, it's an imaginary term, that is cluster. Inside this cluster, you create multiple EC2 instances. Okay. Now these EC2 instances, you don't create yourself, you create a cluster, and ECS automatically creates these EC2 instances. Now what happens that these EC2 instances are created automatically. So you just create a cluster, and automatically all these EC2 instances are created automatically and are managed by cluster. Cluster is going to manage these EC2 instances. Now, all these EC2 instances are going to be used, okay, to run containers, Now, basically what happens that when you have your own EC2, okay, and you want to run container, you can run your container. You can run 5 containers. But the problem is that you will be responsible if any container goes down, you will be responsible to replace it with new one. Or if you want to increase number of containers, you will be yourself responsible. But for a human, it's impossible to maintain one EC2 and manage these containers because there can be hundreds of containers. And it's really impossible to manage these containers manually one by one. It's not humanly possible. So now you need a container service. Now, either you can use Kubernetes or you can use ECS. The purpose of ECS and Kubernetes is to container orchestrate. Container orchestration is the reason that why you will use ECS or Kubernetes. With the help of container orchestration, what happens now? You just give your container, you just ask the cluster to run this container. Now, what cluster will do? Cluster will basically place this container anywhere here in any EC2, and it will run. And it will also orchestrate. If the demand increases, it will immediately create more copies on multiple EC2 instances or on the same EC2 instances. If there is only one EC2 instance, it will create multiple copy on same EC2 instance. Or if any, let's imagine this container goes down, immediately ECS cluster will create a new one. So this is the container orchestration. Always remember, there are two container orchestration steps which are primarily taken care of. One is the placing of EC2 container on EC2. And second is, if any EC2 goes down, it will immediately replace it with the new one. So this is the container orchestration, which is done by ECS, and the same thing is done by Kubernetes. But Kubernetes has a different concept altogether. Forget about it. Now, what is the difference between ECS and EC2? So if we have only EC2, we are allowed to run as many containers as we can. But the problem is, who will do the container orchestration? That's the main problem. And what is container orchestration? First is placing the container in the virtual machine or EC2. Second is the replacing the faulty one with the new one. Replacing the faulty one with new one. Okay. And the third is also scalability. Like in case you need more containers, then who will automatically scale up? Who will add more number of containers? So these are the three benefits of container orchestration. Now, in EC2, it's okay. If you want to install Jenkins in 5 different containers and you want to run 5 different containers for Jenkins, you can run on EC2. The problem is not running the containers on EC2. Problem is who will do the container orchestration. So in this case, the container orchestration will be done by ECS. ECS is responsible that our purpose is just to tell cluster. Our purpose is just to tell cluster, hey cluster, this is the image you have to run. Now what cluster will do? Cluster will automatically run anywhere on any EC2. It is not our job. We don't care about it. We just talk to cluster and we just tell him that this is the image, run on any EC2, and that application starts running. Now you can imagine. So when you go to the restaurant, okay, when you go to the restaurant, here's a kitchen and here are the tables. You are sitting somewhere over here. You will call the waiter and give the order to the waiter. Now it doesn't matter when waiter goes inside to which chef it gives the order to. If there are 3 chefs, waiter can give the order to any one of the chefs. It doesn't matter to us. As a customer, we just give the order to waiter, and waiter goes in the kitchen and it gives the order to any one of the chef. Just like that, we give our container to the cluster and cluster orchestrated. Cluster runs that container in any one of the EC2 instance. We don't care. We just want our application to run in the form of container on any EC2 instance. And if we need more scalability, ECS will scale the number of containers. Okay. And if any container goes down, it will automatically replace the container with the new one. Does that make sense? Everyone, do you understand the difference between ECS and EC2? And you understand what is ECS?
Yes.
Yeah, Ola, again, Baljinder.
Yeah. Well, from what you just
Yes.
explained, I think you're saying it's a fully managed container orchestration service for
Exactly.
easy deployment and scalability of containerized applications.
Exactly, Ola.
Oh, okay.
Very, very nicely put. Thank you so much. So this is something which ECS does. So now do you think that ECS is really important for us?
Yes.
Now, surprisingly, when ECS, though Kubernetes has captured maybe more than 95% of the entire world's market, Kubernetes is like super hot. But organizations which is completely on AWS, they still believe that ECS is a very strong service. So they are still on ECS. And many organizations are on ECS. If you put this ECS keyword in your resume, that actually takes you to the next level because organizations are looking for someone who knows ECS. And you know what? ECS is not a very rocket science. It's not a rocket science. ECS is actually made up of 3 important components.
Thank you for watching. Switch from non-IT to IT today. Explore www.thinkcloudly.com.